This is the Bailed Out Podcast,
You have rights. Nobody knows how to deal with the bureaucracy.
where we talk bail to keep you out of jail.
The only thing that saved me each time is I wasn't drunk.
Does that mean you're a really bad driver then?
Hosted by Sean Plotkin, a multi-generational bail agent and 5-star author. And John Roraba, a non-profit founder and attorney who has helped over 20,000 families.
We're not far right, we're not far left, we're very neutral, I hope.
Bail is the balance.
John, what is justice?
That is what the court system is there to establish.
Bailed Out is brought to you in part by SearchAndMate.com, Turning Leaf, and Angels Bail Bonds. Now, please welcome your hosts, Sean and John.
All right, so thanks for coming back, everybody. It's exciting for today. We're going to be talking about some current events. John, what's on the hit parade?
Greetings, Sean. John Roraba, and we're here to talk today about some of the new current events. I thought we'd start off with Elon Musk's news. We just heard today he bought Twitter.
You know, what's in his mind? What's he think he can fix, or what's going to change? Who knows? But I guess that goes back into wanting to control our destiny and being able to not have our civil liberties being encroached. And I don't know. What do you think of that?
Well, basically he's an engineer, and you see what he did with Tesla, you see what he's done with SpaceX. He's reinvented a lot of things, and I think he's been frustrated by politics. And Twitter, I think Elon is looking at as a way to reinvent the communications, the political communications for the world. Yeah, because Twitter has been picked up by politicians, but really no one else. So that's I think I think that's Elon's back of his head, is that we've got this new technology, people aren't using it right. I love Twitter because it's limited to 120 characters, and so it's necessarily poetic in its nature.
No, I hear you. And a friend of mine just today told me along the lines of, if it's not broke, don't fix it, which goes back into Anne-Marie Schubert. She is running for the most recent California Attorney General, and it seems like she's trying to restore some of the things that are broken that shouldn't have been broken in the first place.
I really admire Anne Marie. I've known her for a number of years in Sacramento. She's been a very good DA. She's really, she came to the bail convention and spoke, and especially considering her opponent, Rob Bonta, is one of the authors of the anti-bail bill that I believe has caused so much of the crises in California. It would be nice to have an attorney general that is actually really enforcing the laws of California in a fair way.
And somebody that cares about victims' rights and
Yes.
and survivors' rights, and somebody
Yes.
that's going to fight for the common person in our social fabric. Where it seems like, I don't know, I was reading in the news earlier that Gascon is trying to try children for life sentences or something like that. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's one of the problems I have with the whole progressive movement in the criminal justice system is when you look at what their rhetoric is. I often agree with it, but when you look at the solutions always involve more power to the state. And that's just another example of that. And so I think that a lot of that a lot of those who are trying to increase the criminal justice system actually are doing it from they just want more control. They want more control. They want more control over all aspects of our life. But the criminal justice system is really a point of control. And it's difficult because you've got this balance when crime spikes the way it is, you often get that backlash, and you end up incarcerating more people, and they weren't the ones that caused the problem. So there's to me, the answer comes into, are you focusing at a community level? Because it's really the communities that need to be able to deal with the crime in their communities, and we have to empower them to do that. And often just writing more laws and putting more people in prison is not really the answer to the problem.
Or even letting them out. But getting to your point where you say it's about the progressive agenda to be increasing the state, I agree on most parts, but I would argue in policing, Let's take a look at the recent article that's been done in that talks about the Walgreens in San Francisco,
Sure.
where they've reduced the operating hours, and many of the security guards, they have guns, they have tasers, but they're told don't do anything because it's not worth the liability. And many of these security guards are having knives pulled on them. And so Walgreens and Target, for the matter, in San Francisco, Sacramento, and parts of LA have reduced their operating hours and are potentially shutting down some locations. So yes,
Absolutely.
progressive agenda, increase the state, but the police support, which goes back to another article
Right.
about how murders of police officers are.
Yeah.
If you want to elaborate on that one, it's crazy.
Yeah, it came out just recently. There's been a 59% increase in the murders of police officers. And you can see overall there's just been a degradation of the legitimacy of the state. And there's been a lot of my problem with the progressives is I don't think that their rhetoric of trying to minimize the criminal agenda is actually true. I think that what they're actually doing is trying to increase government control, and it's the backlash. Whenever the bail has been decreased, government pretrial has been increased, crime is increased.
Yeah.
And when crime increases, that's something that has had throughout all the decades, that I've been looking at this, the backlash. I remember I was in law school when the three strikes law came. And one of the points they made, some of the people in my law school were actually helping to craft that. And one of the points they made is that there was a very few number of people committing most of the crimes. And so if you could just take those few people out and that they had their, 2 serious felonies and then a third felony, that they could be removed. And that made sense to me at the time. That made sense that you've got to protect the public primarily, and you've got a few people that are really committing most of the crimes. And now with with the revolving door that they've set up as governmental pretrial, we're seeing that again.
And it's not even just with the crimes that we're talking about for theft or petty theft at Walmart, but we're talking about violent crimes and people
Absolutely.
Killing people. And it's like, when is it going to be enough? People don't want to go outside of their homes. And
Well, some of the things too, it's hard to know sometimes when it's just the news and it's just stories, or when it's in your personal life. I can tell you, doing my bail motions where you're dealing with people as fugitives, I've had 4 people in the last week on motions that I've done that have been shot and killed. We've gotten exonerations from. I might get 1 or 2 of those a year. We've had 4 this week.
it just blows my mind to think that, somebody that's under 18 could be tried for life, but violent offenders and are being able to be out free. I mean, how do you differentiate? Of course, somebody commits a crime, they should do the time. But what is in the mind of a progressive agenda? What is the end game? Like, I can't even speculate what the end game is, nor have I been told it to be able to go, oh, well, I can kind of see A to B to C. That's far from Z, but I could see, but there is no linear thought process or argument to be able to substantiate a position. Or do you know of it? Because I'd love to hear it.
Well, I try and focus on, where the power is, where who's making the decision. That's why I like bail rather than government pretrial, because bail, it allows you to distinguish between those people that are minions and those people that are just, making mistakes, and because minions are a bad bet for a bail agent, right? As I've said before, in the modern criminal justice system, I think the best.
You speak with very. Can you explain to me what your interpretation as a minion is, so we can all get it?
Yeah.
I kind of got it. I think I know it, but I want to hear you say it.
It's the little yellow guys with a single eye, that come out. I mean,
But there's a lot of room for those little guys in the jail.
There are. Those who are working for criminal enterprises, right? Those who are working there. There's a lot of the crimes with Walgreens and the other smash and grabs are organized criminal elements that are hiring people to go in and commit the crimes, and and then they will send them home. They're usually exploiting immigrant populations, and it's hard for government to know the difference between who one of those minions are. I like the term minion.
I do too.
And somebody who is really in need, right? But their families know. Their families know, and because the families know, the bail agents know.
Yeah.
But even if the state does know, they can't do anything about it because they really can't. Their systems of letting people out or not make it really hard to distinguish between who's there and who's not. And even then, they're just holding them in jail pretrial, which is very expensive. If you could find some family member, even when you're a minion working for a criminal organization, that's not your only connection. Usually you will have people that can help get you out of that more serious circumstance, because that's just often people are doing that for survival.
So then, with pretrial, then a public defender wouldn't be able to go before a judge and be able to articulate a reason or a cause, or this person fell into poor judgment. Or with pretrial, if you want to explain a little bit about it, that I would infer these people are released prior to even going before somebody that can make a consideration on whether this person is a risk to the community or should be in jail or shouldn't be in jail.
Well, they do try. It's not that they don't try. I mean, they do get reports. They do get the histories. They
Who's
do.
who's that?
I'm sorry. It's not like the government pretrial systems don't try to make those decisions.
Mhm.
It's simply that with the constitutional blindness of the state and the time periods that they're working in, those predictive algorithms and those predictive reports are just not very good at telling the difference between who's going to show up in court and who's going to continue committing crimes.
So you're saying the constitutional blindness of the state is because of the artificial intelligence or the algorithms that are pre-entered with data sets that may be inaccurate, that could be biased or prejudiced, or what causes the constitutional blindness of this state?
Well, our Constitution, the state is just so powerful, and it has abused the criminal justice system so much throughout history that our Bill of Rights is limitations on the government's power, like your right to remain silent, your right to keep your papers private, the need for probable cause before the arrest. All of those things give a blindness to the state that we need, because the state has to prove their process. I mean, we just learned over a long period of time that the state has to be controlled with rules and by the courts, or it will abuse its power.
Well, and that blindness, I would argue, over the past 3 years, with all of the measures that have happened and the agenda that's been pursued, has made us even more blind.
It has, absolutely, because we've taken those with the best vision and limited them to a very few cases, and that's the bail agents. The bail agents just have a better perspective on whether or not somebody is going to be safe to be released from jail.
Well, hopefully Anne Marie is the one-eyed queen in the world of the blind.
She's done a really good job, and I really think that having someone with her dedication to really the safety and the well-being of our communities, in that position of the Attorney General is going to help. I really think
Yes.
she can do a good job there.
Also, with her intent to assess the mental health crisis that we're
Yes.
facing with our social fabric that's deteriorated all around. I mean, it's hard to hear of an attorney general that's empathizing on more than one side.
Well, and the mental illness, actually, it brings up an even more important point with the government being able to not assess that in the time and with the tools that they're given in a government pretrial to know something as complex as somebody's mental state, and the mental illness, and because sometimes it just lasts for short periods. Sometimes it lasts for long periods. Again, that's a circumstance where somebody that's socially significant to the defendant, knows. And if they're not going to be liable, sometimes that's a person who needs to stay in jail.
Yeah, absolutely, and that as well as leaving skin in the game or tit for tat. You're not going to have somebody get out without something to guarantee their appearance in court. And if there's a family member that won't serve to guarantee that person's appearance, and that's pretty a loud shouting recognition. As I've said before in other bail podcasts, I've had a number of family members that want to get their loved ones out that have been bailed out 7, 8, 9 times. And I'm like, don't do it. And then I have to talk them not to do it. But when a parent's like, hey, I don't want to get my loved one out, I'm like, thank you for being honest with me. I don't want to get them out either. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Well, I mean, if you don't want to get them out, then why do I want to get them out? So why is the state getting people out when the family knows better? And where's the choice?
Well, and that's clarifying, right? Your decision to take the liability for someone's appearance in court, because the bail agent is taking on personal liability. That's the thing that most people misunderstand about bail the most. The bail agent is liable to pay that forfeiture themselves if they can't collect it and the defendant doesn't go to court. It's personal liability, and that's what gives you the incentive to know if you don't want them out, neither do I.
It's funny to be on a call for an hour with a mom or dad, and they're spending the hour telling me how they are not going to sign for them to guarantee and not put up any collateral, and they're like, "Okay, so you're going to do it?" I'm like, well, what would you do after you just told me, and imagine I told you that for an hour? Would you vouch for this person? You're the mom. This is your kid.
Right.
You
Right.
thought that hour of us communicating and building rapport would change your own opinion? So I ask you, after spending the hour, did you change your mind? Because you've just spent an hour telling me why I shouldn't do it. Well, why did you stay on the phone? Well, because most of the time what happens after I sit with you for an hour, you start to come around. But
Right.
if you're not to coming around, well, then why did I waste an hour? Well, I don't know. Do you want to get your loved one out? I mean,
Well, and
it's a
that's
soul
not-
search. We're psychiatrists as bondsmen.
That's so true, and it's so important, and that transition. When someone's arrested, it's transformative, right? It changes their look on their life, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it takes, I've had family members and friends that have taken 7 or 8 arrests, and then finally they got it, and then when they had enough pressure. But it is something that a bail agent will do naturally, because you have to find out if this is someone safe for you to vouch for. That lack of personal liability is one of the big problems in decision making with government pretrial. Nobody loses anything if that guy they release goes out and commits more crimes or doesn't come back or whatever he goes. There's no real responsibility for the person who made the decision to let them out of jail.
Well, absolutely. And I know that a lot of moms and dads and aunts and uncles, grandmas, grandpas are listening to this. But as a bail agent, I've gotten to be, I argue, a much better parent, because I sit there and I listen to everybody's back and forth and with this, and then I wonder, well, how do I want to raise my kids differently, and what do I want to do, and how do I want them to be more autonomous and independent, so successful and happy and well adjusted? And I was reading an article about the graduate advisor at Stanford, and she gave one head of a recommendation of how to make your student be the most successful. Do you know what that was?
No.
Family contributions. It's the simple term
Interesting.
for doing chores. Have that family member do chores in the house, because
Absolutely.
they are relied upon to be a part of the family unit.
Yeah.
And then if they don't do it, then the trash isn't taken out, it builds up, and they see consequences. They see cause and effect. And I argue that the jail and the criminal justice system and bail and components of that are a similar outreach of helping a person understand cause and effect. And then they'll have a
Right.
greater buy-in for a social fabric, for a greater accountability to be able to contribute.
Well, and particularly for young men, right? And remember, we're almost talking exclusively about 15 to 25-year-old men. That's like 80% of the arrests. And so you're exactly right. It's often just their emotional development and understanding the responsibility of being a human. And that arrest can be a part of that, and can be a part of because a crisis and an opportunity often have the same launching point, and what you become at the end of that, you've got a real opportunity to change. One of the things I really like about bail that I think has been underappreciated is bail gets those arrestees out first. It's 6 weeks to months before they make that first appearance in court. If they get bailed out, they won't even see a public defender for a couple of months. So in a sense, that's an opportunity for the community to try and come together and see what support they can lend to, by the time the defendant goes to court, most of, if not the whole problem is resolved. Courts really want you to resolve the problems.
It almost makes me wonder if we're looking at other cultures, but we look at commercial bail, which is predominantly only in the United States and primarily California, many other larger states, and the Philippines, which is in some ways an American world. But then when you look to Japan, where they don't really have as much crime, and they have something, the Karetsu, which is the social whole and the fabric rather than the individual. It would be interesting to look at, there's something called Hofstadt's, he has a power parity index. He's got individualization versus collectivism, where the more individualistic you are, the less you are into the whole. And when you take a look at like the low crime rates in Japan or Singapore, where you can't even spit on the ground.
The American Indian cultures, North and South America, all had very strict rules, but were very few, and everybody followed them,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of the opposite of what we've done. We've made very complicated rules that everybody avoids.
Yeah, no, I was an anthropology major at UC Santa Barbara, Go Gauchos, and one of the classes that they had, and I didn't go back and re-verify if the information was correct, so if it's wrong, somebody please tell me, but when kids that were babies would cry, they would be hung from trees in their papoose away from the camp, and they would be able to cry themselves out, so they don't reveal where they're at. But the child would learn at an early age not to be dependent on others, to soothe themselves, and then to move on. And then once they had gotten themselves calmed and with it, then they're brought back into the community, and then they're realizing, you know what, I need to grow up. I need to be independent. I need to be able to contribute. I can't be a strain on society. So, I mean, I'm sorry, guys, we're going all around in circles
that's
here,
okay.
but it's
That's all right. This is all connected.
Yeah.
I've seen big studies of raising children in Mayan societies, and where the children needs are met, much more. Overtly, I should say, all their needs are taken care, and they've just had much better emotional development of the Mayan children than the who they call, the anthropologists call us weird. What is it? Western, industrialized, educated. I can't remember the last two. Something developed, right? But that biggest weirdness that we've had in the West is that we've lost our communities. We just don't have that community connections of our friends. And I keep going back to that because everything I see in the news of crisis seems to be something where there's a conflict between the societal structure and the community structure. And when you've got those, you always have to pick communities over societies because, there's societies are just fictional entities.
Well, what's the difference?
So communities are the people you share air with, right? The people you actually work with.
So like 100 or so people.
It could be. Well, if you go to Dunbar with the anthropology, it's 150 is the full tribe size. But we've just developed as these herd animals, right? We are tribal in our nature. That's the thing that's really changed in the 20th century. If you look at Brave New World with Huxley and his Fordism, really that's what that book is about.
Do you want to explain it, because I don't know that most of it.
Sure, of course. So Huxley in the book Brave New World restarts history in 1913 with Ford's factory and essentially just projects what that factory life would be 600 years in the future. So everyone is produced by factories. The most offensive word is mother, and he really broke down that fundamental philosophy of all the 20th century politics, which is to have cohesion at that national and global scale, and then have the communities become really they're atomized to become individuals that buy from the social level.
So are there trains in this Brave New World?
Trains?
Yeah.
Oh, I think there were airplanes. Yeah, Brave New World's an amazing book if you haven't read it.
Well, because I asked, because we've been reading an article about UPS that has a major train delivery area in LA, and they're talking about not delivering packages because the packages are being stolen, and they have their own police force, but it's not sufficient, and Gascon's not willing to help prosecute with that. So now UPS is like, let's stop delivering packages, or let's change our route. I mean, it's crazy.
When you look at some
is that our Brave New World?
Well, it may be.
Maybe Gascon's pursuing Huxley to be able to do.
Yeah. We're becoming more and more third world in many ways, and you can look at that. A lot of the breakdowns over the last year, but it could just also be that our global system is disintegrating and is going to reform.
But maybe
something
third
better.
world isn't a bad thing. I used to own an import-export company, go to Brazil 6 to 10 times through the year for the past 10 years, and I'll tell you, the quality of the food is way better.
Totally.
Which goes back to the Native Americans.
Yeah.
If there's a book about the teeth. Right now, our teeth are bad because of our agrarian economy, where we're not really, or industrialized with sugar and flour, and we're becoming more mouth breathers, and it's causing these distortions and all that stuff. Where you're able to have better food and chew it, and it helps your jaw structure. Then you don't
Yep.
have to get your wisdom teeth removed.
Right.
There's
That's absolutely true.
yeah.
Actually, yeah, people's jaws aren't growing enough. That's why we have the wisdom's teeth out because they're not eating as the food. I just recently learned about a practice of Taoism that's become big in China called Bigu. Bigu, and it's just avoiding the 5 grains. And the Taoist, centuries ago realized that the grains were something with civilization.
Well,
And
but to that, one of those is wheat. Oh,
yeah,
no.
totally,
And Ukraine is a major supplier of wheat.
absolutely.
So how do we get back into the current events to talk about what's going on? What you believe maybe we're looking at a famine
Yeah.
impending.
Yeah, I mean, look, there was a really bad famine in the world not that long ago in 2008, after the last stock market crash. Now this really pretends an even worse famine because Ukraine is the breadbasket. That actually supplies a lot of the food for the world. And I was reading one article, and I don't know so much about the sources, but it was pointing out that in the United States, there's been a bunch of arsons of food processing plants all over the country. Whether or not we're being prepped to have civil unrest so that there's food disruptions, it's just something to
Could
think
this be
about.
a corollary of what you would think maybe another progressive agenda?
Well,
Or should we not go there?
yeah,
Because I know in the Communist Manifesto, they say for communism to succeed, capitalism must first fail. So is this an attempt for capitalism to fail?
Orwell, who's my other big political leader, 1984, all of Orwell's books are amazing. And he points out that the basis of politics is food. Without food, we're not here. And if you look culturally at those cultures that live off of grains, those are the same cultures that have wars. One of my favorite movies is The Seven Samurai, where every year the bandits come and steal the rice from the farmers, right? Nobody's coming digging up your potatoes. Right? Those who live off of trees and roots and that more natural system, like the California Indians did for
Yeah.
so many years.
Which is part of Turning Leaf. You want to be able to have a community of.
Absolutely.
Why don't you explain a little bit about Turning Leaf, and let's bring it back into some other Bail and Bail-oriented stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, having a place where you can support your own family is very important. That's the original American dream. If you can be self-sufficient, then the rich can't leverage you. Right now, a lot of this is we're being leveraged because we don't have the capacities to survive without these global networks, and these global networks are breaking down. So fundamentally, we need to be able to get ourselves a more stable way of supporting our life. And if you're going to do that at a community level, you might as well start with the ones who are in crisis. So getting the bail agents and the nonprofits to cooperate, with those families of those who are arrested, that gives us the opportunity to try and stabilize their system as well. And if it's done right, then the first shall be last and the last shall be first.
Nice.
It's when you have a community to go to, when you're in crisis, you go to the community. Oftentimes, people in war are actually happier because they have to rely on each other. And they're not relying on money. They're not relying on those global structures that really are so disconnected to us that it's just hard to survive with them and feel comfortable.
Which goes back to the Constitution and how our civil liberties are being changed. And I thought a
Right.
little bit about, I was reading Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. And I
Mhm.
thought, happiness seems like a short-term selfish goal, and happiness can be different for someone else. If somebody wants to go shoot somebody and it makes them happy, is that
Yeah.
right?
Well, it depends on the scale, right? So again, if you take that individual scale, the community scale, and the societal scale, who's being happy?
Right.
If your communities are happy, then you've got a stable society and happy individuals.
Well, I was thinking what should be in place of Pursuit of Happiness, and it goes back to your people that in war times are more productive, higher morale, all that. I think it
Right.
might be pursuit of meaning,
Meaning,
and
right?
pursuit of purpose.
Right?
And so I think our point of being here, our purpose, our meaning for Bailed Out is to reach out, educate people, help them, be able to guide them, be able to nurture them, and for Turning Leaf to be able to help families to help out their loved ones to be able to find meaning, to find purpose, to
It's a great point.
satisfy Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
One of David Graeber's my favorite points of his is that so much of our economy takes away the ability to do good and do well. A lot of the jobs that are essential jobs don't pay, so the jobs that are really necessary aren't being rewarded, and the jobs that are being rewarded are, I think his technical term, bullshit. Corporate attorneys may not be doing any good for society, but they're actually collecting more money, right? So bail is actually one of the few places where you can do well by doing good. And that's one of the things I've really liked about working with bail agents for all these years, is because there's just not a lot of places in the world where you can really help people every day and still be prosperous.
Well, I would argue that maybe the California Attorney General may have that station to be able to do well by doing good, and I hope that that's
There are a
Henry
few.
Schubert.
Yeah.
And what else can we say to help support her, and or close it up and figure out how to support the people?
Yes, Anne Marie, we hope you're elected. California is got a lot of amazing opportunities, and we're working together on it. We've got a whole lot of new technology to integrate, and just like the last several technological revolutions, I really look to us to be able to set the example that the rest of the world can live in. They're all living in suburbs now, controlled by cars, right? We're the ones who did that, right? We gotta get that next
Well,
level.
I don't know. I think that's another segment, because I think with the governor, he's pushed for accessory dwelling units to be doing lot splits, to be bringing back the city structure. But to that point, other technological leaders have left our state. So hopefully, when we start bringing back some law and order, and maybe less taxes and maybe lower gas prices and all that,
Yes,
then maybe we'll get
all
back
those
to
are
being
true.
a leader in our country. What'd you take away from our talk today?
Yeah, today we had a very good talk. It was a lot of subjects. The world right now is changier than it's ever been, and we've got a lot of opportunities. I think it's really important that we look at these changes not as crises, but as opportunities, because we have so many amazing tools, and we have so much new technology, and we have so many wonderful places to go.
Yeah, and for me, I think I came to realize we should determine underlying constructs that are universal maxims that we should operate from in our discussion to
Yeah.
help perpetuate what it is we're trying to teach and educate and guide people. So listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Remember to follow, rate, and review. And this podcast has been made possible by Angels Bail Bonds, Turning Leaf, searchinmate.com, and that book there, Get Bail, Leave Jail. If you have any bail questions or concerns, or if you want to sit on the phone for an hour and bitch about your kid and tell us you don't want to get them out, give us a call at 844-BY-JAIL, BYE jail, not BUY. That's a whole nother segment about private enterprise and jails, but that's something else. And John, you want to?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to leave us with, bail is critical to the infrastructure. Our infrastructure is going to be stronger if the more we have private bail agents working and making the decisions on who should be let out of jail, along with the families. I think that's
And who
important to our
shouldn't be let out
infrastructure.
also.
And who shouldn't, exactly. Who should and shouldn't, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.